Welcome to the Calling All Messengers podcast, where we help you clarify who you are and why you are as a Christ-centered messenger. Join us as we share key insights and processes that will encourage and empower you to reach your tribe. Now listen in with your host, certified life purpose coach and messenger midwife, Terikka and online business strategist and resident messenger, Lakesha Gates.
We want to welcome you all back to another episode of the Calling All Messengers podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something that every messenger has to have at the front and center of who they're called to, what God is calling them to. And it's the question of your mess or the mandate. What have you come out of and or experienced that has birthed your desire to share your message with others? It's important to recognize that I should introduce my co-host, Keisha.
I'm here as always.
Guys, sometimes I know we try to do podcasts and we definitely want to be professional and share, but part of this whole process for messengers is that Keisha and I, we do banter, we do go back and forth. And so you guys are going to get a little bit of that. That doesn't mean it won't be some post-production things, but our personality is going to have to come through this process because this has absolutely been a journey as we've clarified our mess and mandate. Sometimes, Keisha, there's people are kind of like you've had to go through something just dire for you to have a message from God. And I'm learning that that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a matter of, yes, something that you've gone through, but also sometimes it may be something that you have witnessed. I look at the teachers who feel compelled to go work in schools that have students who are labeled at risk, and they just feel a sense of call to situate themselves in those spaces. Now, they may have had a family that was affluent or that was put together, but there was still something that tugged on them based on who God called them to be and their gifts and their wiring, that they're saying, well, I have to go and be a missionary messenger in this place. So I want to just be really clear that I'm not saying that you had to have gone through something tragic for this now to be the banner that you wave and the cause that you want to speak to. But it is important to know, though, that if you are a messenger, that there is some sort of potential mess that you have come through that has now influenced your message, or there's a mandate that's been placed on your life through something that you've witnessed, you've encountered, and that something was awakened in you because of that thing that God has placed in you. And that's what we're talking about today in being sensitive to that thing that God has placed in your life, just so we're not chasing everything. Keisha, do you want to chime in?
We always get on and chat a little bit before we press record. And so I was actually just bringing up how I feel like media plays a part in what we have created as a standard. And so it's interesting that you just said that even if you haven't personally gone through things, maybe it's you've witnessed it in your own personal life with friends, or maybe you've seen something on TV or on social media that kind of triggered a heart response, a tugging on your heart that says, what, I need to do something about this. I feel compelled. I don't even know why I feel compelled, but I feel this strong urgency to respond. And that's, again, another aspect of what we're talking about today, that cry, that thing that just makes your heart sad, makes you want to show compassion or empathy.
I talk a lot about how whatever moves you should move you. And so, Keisha, if you're willing, we can talk a little bit about just how we sense the mandate or the mess on our own lives and how it brought us into this messenger space. And so I can honestly say sometimes you don't even realize that a message is even being formed in you. You're just kind of going about your life, going through the human development cycle. And then there's these things that happen and before you were in that space. And so for me, those who walk with me closely know that at the end of my high school years, I just went through just a really intense identity crisis. I didn't really know who I was. I'm going to go ahead and be clear because sometimes we try to cloak it because we don't want to, quote unquote, put all of our business out there. But this is a part of my story. And so I'm going to share it here. But just really just a sexual identity crisis. And just really just not knowing just who I was. All I knew was that I wanted to get out of Texas and I left Texas running. Even the college that I chose was very liberal because my whole stance was I'm getting ready to leave here and I'm going to go somewhere where be all of me or all of who I thought I was. And unbeknownst to me that God knew that I was going to make that decision. And literally doing orientation week, they always have at our campus, freshmen would come early and they would have upperclassmen there to kind of show them around, show them the ropes before all the upperclassmen came back on campus. And so lo and behold, God had two male juniors who were Christians. And now you got to understand these schools were some of the most liberal of all. So the fact that two were around, that is not typical once again with the schools that I went to. And so I'm not even going to lie. I was almost offended at God. I was like, I came here to unleash, to be who I thought I was. And here you go intercepting me before I even have a chance to do things to really repent of. But I'd also been praying too. I didn't have the most solid biblical background in that sense, but I knew that I wanted to know who God was. And I knew that I wouldn't try to blatantly defy what it was he had for me. So my whole thing was you kind of get those mixed messages that God loves you for who you are. And that is absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't have a standard and that he doesn't have truth. And so he met me and it was so strange. I mean, I still was professing like, this is who I am, but they just invited me to be a part of like Christian ministries. they consistently loved me. And the thing was, they invited me to go to this, I guess, this Christian camp that they would have at the end of every school year. And I was just like, nope, don't have the money. Oh, we have scholarships. Oh, I don't have a sleeping bag. Oh, we can get you a sleeping bag. So every excuse that I had to not want to go, because yes, I wanted God, but I still felt like there was this large part of me that I needed to explore. And so long story short, all the excuses removed, it was made possible for me to go to Catalina Island. And for those of you guys who don't know, this campsite was only geared towards Christian camps. So literally when you got on there, it just felt like I was standing on holy ground. So stuff that I may have thought about while I was on the school campus, that there was no kind of conviction around in that atmosphere, all of a sudden it was just, the atmosphere was just a little bit thicker with God's presence. And I ended up having a dream that was really foul. And if I would have had it in another context, I don't know that it would have fazed me as much. But in this setting, it was like, Lord, I need prayer. So that morning when I woke up, we all had breakfast together. I said, guys, I'm telling you now that I had this dream and it really rocked me. And you guys can pray with me tonight. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to put myself on the hook, because I knew that every evening we had these prayer sessions. And I didn't want to, as the day goes on, your dream fades, it doesn't feel as weighty anymore and that kind of thing. But I knew that I needed God's intervention. So we get to the night session and I share with them a little bit of the dream and they began to pray for me. And so I don't know about you guys, but there's some people who have this gift of like getting word pictures when they pray. I believe that these are picture smart people and that's how God speaks to them. And basically in this dream, they saw me in this wedding dress and I was at this banquet and I was getting ready to sit down. And you know, they have like the maitre d' and they have those fancy dishes where they get ready to unveil the main dish. So I'm getting down and everything is looking celebratory, looking right, looking the part. And they take the lid off and it's nothing but dog food. And just what God began to speak to me, he was like, Terikka, just because people are dressing it up and making it okay and making it seem like it's okay, that doesn't mean that this is what I have ordained for my people. Because my whole thing was, I didn't want any more opinions from people. Like, God, if this is not what you have for me, then I need you to speak to me. And so God honored me with that in the prayer time. And it didn't feel manipulated. It didn't feel like anyone was trying to make me anything, because they didn't even know the heart of everything that I was internalizing. And so at the end of that week, God gave me this poem called It's Time. And basically it was like, I've asked those around me, what am I doing wrong? And they told me nothing's wrong. They tried to find me, but they couldn't find the meaning to my broken song. So what am I to believe? Am I walking in the light? Am I who I'm supposed to be? And basically the whole thing was, Lord, I'm tired. It's time for me to be the child that you created me to be, not tomorrow, but today, because it's time. And so literally that's where the onset of the mandate and the ministry of It's Time came about. Because I know you guys are hearing Calling All Messengers or the Messenger Experience, but It's Time is the banner name of the ministry that God has called me to. And we cleaned it up. The tagline is now clarifying who you are and why you are. But I need you guys to understand that mandate came out of that moment of, it's time for us to be the children that God has created us to be, not tomorrow, but today, because it's time. God is not confused about our design, who he's made us to be, and the truth of that. And that is where I have now a flaming desire for people to understand who they are and why they are, so they can live as God has called them to be. So it became more than just a message of just clearing up sexual identity and other things of that nature. It became, no, Terikka, it's not just about that, because people are more than just even their sexual identity. Call them and situated them in this generation at such a time as this. David said, I serve the Lord in my own generation. So there's a reason you were even born in this generation. You could have been born in the 1920s and your whole mixtape wouldn't be of any relevance at this moment. So I just want to encourage you guys to really look at your story, and you can kind of see those pivot points, those Christ moments, those times where God has provoked something, stirred something, moved something. And there you're going to see the nexus of the mandate and the message that God is calling you to. So I just want to just encourage you guys to really look at your story. We always have those memes that are out right now saying how it started and where we are now. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of context of how it started for me and just where we are now. So now I am just in passion to help people clarify who they are and why they are. And specifically, messengers is where my passion has landed, because at 21 years old, I couldn't say I'm trying to reach messengers. Messengers are like people who are in the legacy phase of life, late 30s, 40s, that kind of thing. So this is a message that I've had to grow into. So just know that it may start with the seedling of a message, but that thing is going to continue to evolve and to grow with you. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Keisha and share how she recognized that she had a message or a mandate and where it started and where are we now?
Well, Terikka, I don't know if I have a story form like you have. It's been different moments in my life that have triggered a response for me to walk as the messenger that you see today. But it's something that you talk about. Rarely, if ever, are we charged to carry a message that we haven't personally experienced. And growing up as a product of teenage parents, my mom was 16, my dad was 17. he had my mom pregnant, my brother's mom pregnant at the same time. Me and my brother are ghetto twins, we call ourselves, because we're 3 months apart. And for me, that's when everything really started, because from the moment of my conception, there has been something circling it from the beginning of my life. And I know there's these different moments in my life that I can go back and I can say, okay, when my mom was pregnant with me and they're young and they were contemplating abortion, and there was a counselor at their high school that they went to get just $7. I call it the $7 story. They were short $7. And she was a woman of God, and she stepped in and said, no, I won't do this. And you're going to go talk to your parents. And if your parents say no, then I'll figure out what I can do. And a little bit more of that story that I've been exposed to is that it wasn't the only time. My mom tried again, and she went to a hospital that didn't believe in abortion, and they basically lied and told her that she was further along than she really was, so that she couldn't get the abortion. And so hearing those stories over my life have made me have just a different outlook on life than most people, because I realized from an early age that my life does have purpose. My life does have meaning, and God came in and interceded on my behalf before I was even born. But just like you, it's not because I went to seminary or I was in Bible study or children's church my whole life. I didn't really start building a relationship with Christ until I was in middle school when I met a girlfriend of mine. But I always knew that there was something, right? And throughout my life, there was tons of ups and downs. There were rocks thrown on my path to try to get me to stumble, right? But the last straw was there was this gap in between when I left for college. And what I mean by left for college, I stopped going to church because I went away to college. And I had made a commitment then that I just wasn't going back to church, that organized religion is the devil. I didn't want no parts of it because people were being manipulative in the church, all that. I had it. And I knew that I loved God, and I knew that Jesus Christ was my Lord and Savior, but about all the other stuff, I need that in my life. And so Buki and I, my husband, we out of the blue, I say out of the blue, but God is the orchestrator of all things. Out of the blue, he comes talking about he wants to go to church. And I'm like, what is it that we're talking about here? Because we don't do that. We don't go to church every Sunday. That's not how we live our life. And I was anti-church. And so he actually started going back to Word of Truth International Ministries before I did. And he started going, and then eventually he invited me. It was Easter Sunday or something like that. And I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, it's like they apparently knew Buki, but I didn't know these people, but they acted like they knew me. And when I tell you I was so uncomfortable, they were hugging me and just so excited to see me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? So that was kind of like the beginning of the spiral down, I can be honest, because we started going and we started building relationship, and I was reformed in my mental. I'm not even gonna lie, because this group of people were real people. They were not trying to cloak themselves as being holier than thou. They shared their love and their passion for Christ. They shared their flaws and all, right? And so everything was going great, and then boom, Buki cheated on me. And that hadn't been the first time. That was the second time. The first time was prior to us coming to the church. But this time we had a safe space to be able to handle it. And though it was the worst time in my life, God gave me this peace. I cannot even explain it. I was in the middle of it and couldn't explain to people why I was at so much peace. It was like he was shielding me or something from myself, because I'm sure if he hadn't, we wouldn't be living the life we're living now. We wouldn't have Keelan, because at the time Sine was born, and literally shook us up, shook our foundation to the core, almost to the point of divorce. I definitely had kicked him out, put the house for sale by owner, all the things. We were done, but never really done, because in the back of my mind, God had told me, be still, be patient, and be quiet. Be still, be patient, and be quiet. And if those three things are the opposite of what I really want to do, but I am not, I definitely am not quiet, and I'm an action taker. So for me to stay still and not want to fix this, I'm a fixer, not want to fix this, I knew that was a word from him, because that wasn't from me. And so I went and got counseling and realized some things about myself and my life that I hadn't been willing to address over the years. And let me be clear, before I say what I'm getting ready to say, there is no reason for a man or woman to step out on their marriage and blame it on the other person. Okay.
Right.
So I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that even though he has stepped out on our marriage, there was things that I did to contribute to the unhealthy level of our relationship that I didn't even realize that I was doing. It was very unintentional because I had hurt, because I had pain, because I was wounded. Now that I'm older, I understand. But back then, I just didn't get why all these people didn't know the right thing to do. But you got to understand, by this time I'm 27. So my parents are what, 40? There's around the same age that I am now. And hindsight being 2020, you just realize that they didn't know. My grandma was young. My aunts, we were all so young, and my parents, all that. So that was the moment where our whole life changed, was based on this infidelity. And I say this too, understand this is not everybody's story. It was, me and my husband say it all the time, it was the best and worst thing that happened in our lives, because it was that catalyzed us into who we are today and really helped rewrite the narrative of our generation, because we decided to take that mess and allow God to use it as a message.
Wow, Keish, thank you for being willing to be vulnerable on that. So what Keisha is also alluding to is that you can have multiple messages based on just what God has brought them through. And there's also, like Keisha mentioned earlier, she is absolutely an action taker. She has influenced a lot of us. You guys are even experiencing this podcast now because she saw the viability and the need for this message and was like, okay, Terikka, what do we need to get done? I'm just like, I need someone to talk to. Keisha, I'm not good at talking to myself. Well, at least not in public. So I just want to say sometimes our messages are birthed through tremendous confusion. Sometimes it's birthed through tremendous pain. And sometimes it's just a matter of God saying, I know that you're willing. I know that you have a heart for these people. So I am tapping you on the shoulder. And so that's why we talk about, for the messenger, what is the mess and what is the mandate that God has called you out of, called you to. And that's why we're taking the time to give you some background and some context so that you can have some time to reflect on your own journey and on your own process, and just recognizing that in God, none of it is wasted. Sometimes it may be painful to look back at, like Keisha was saying. We wanted different startup stories, but once again, people knew what they knew when they knew it. When we know better, we do better, but we have to face some of these things, even just in our own lives, the pain, so that God can transform it into purpose. Because if Keisha had not gone through the counseling and through the healing, they wouldn't be prepared now to reach other couples, because they would have so many things unaddressed. So unfortunately or fortunately, part of your message is going to be allowing God to address things in you, address things in me, so that we can, if we look at Moses, the first time he saw the injustice, he wanted to address it, but he did it in his own strength. And that thing broke him. He was not even thinking about the children of Israel or doing anything at that point. But God heard the children of Israel's cry, and he came back and revisited Moses. I know 40 years ago you did this in your own strength, but now I'm asking you to do it in me, in my strength. That I am is sending you. So just know that part of your message, your mandate, is going to be something you probably attempt to do in your own strength at some point. Because I'm not even going to lie, guys. I was learning about who you are, taking every personality assessment. Don't get me wrong. I love assessments. I believe there's a place for those. But if your personality and your strengths and all that is not animated by the Spirit of God, it's not going to take us far, and it's not going to do what God is intending it to do. So I want to caution us. Yes, God will use our natural intellect, what we've learned. We went to school and got the 5 steps to counseling about this, the 3 steps to restoring this kind of relationship. But I'm saying, if God doesn't breathe on it, it is going to mock you. Because once again, God wants to use the tools that you have. He wants to use the experiences that you've gone through. But I'm telling you now, you only want to go if God is sent. Because that Pharaoh that's trying to watch over and be gatekeepers of the people you're trying to reach will mess you up if you're not there on the authority of God. So that's just something I want you guys to be thinking about as we get ready to wrap up. Keisha, is there any other admonitions or warnings or just kind of encouragement that you want to give them as they're trying to unpack their own story and seeing what thus saith the Lord is for who they're called to and what their message is?
You just kind of alluded to it a little bit, that if you have not been called to it, you think that you are the one who's fixing it. And as messengers, that is not the message that we're sending. We're saying that we are ambassadors, being a conduit to reconcile you back to a right relationship with God. And that is the message that we're saying, that you need a savior. You need God to come in and help you and pull you up and reach his hand out to save you in a space space where you feel like you might be drowning, in a space where you feel like you don't know which direction to go, or you being pulled in too many different directions, only God can come in and be what you need. So going through the experience yourself allows you to have that empathy, but it also allows you to share that message. I couldn't have did this alone because God was there for me. He sent the right people to surround me in my most dire need. He was there. And so, yes, there's going to be a different message. Yes, I'm going to talk to married couples, but all my married couples have not made it. All of them have not spent 20, 30 years together. And so if I was trying to do it on my own, then we would be looking at that like, oh, we did something wrong, or we had a loss. And that's not the truth of the matter. It's God has shown us that there's a process that people have to go through, but he's also taught us that not everybody is going to follow that process. And so in the midst of you understanding what your mess and your mandate is, and in an effort to go out and be these superheroes to people in the world, you can't save everybody.
That's rich. And so we even go so far as to say you can't save anybody. It's God who does the saving, but it takes our obedience because he chooses to use us as mediators for his message. And that is a very key point that Keisha has made. A messenger is not synonymous with a life coach. You may be a life coach that's a messenger, but not all messengers are life coaches, because sometimes as coaches, there's this whole thing of I have to build my practice and I got my intake questionnaire and I got these questions I'm going to ask. Being a messenger.
Which you should.
Yes, definitely. This is not just about going out here just being willy-nilly and not having processes and frameworks and different things of that nature. But I just want to emphasize the need for it to be breathed on by the Father.
That's right.
And the understanding that if he is saying, slow it down, they're not ready for the next step, this is what I need you to pivot or to introduce in this season. So all I'm saying is the messenger is yielded to the message giver. And that was the episode that we talked about previously. We understand that there is a message giver. So I just want to encourage you guys as you are listening to this podcast and just thinking through your own process and your own story. Being a messenger, you're going to have to be reflective, because you have to ask yourself, what has God brought me out of? And beginning to understand the anatomy of that process. We're going to talk about this a lot. He's given you keys. We didn't just go through stuff just to be going through it. There's a process that you now understand. There's a framework that you now understand that you didn't understand.
A signature system.
A signature system.
You didn't want to have, but it belongs to you now.
And that's just to continue to be reminded that even as you do this more and more, become more familiar with your process and frameworks and your signature system, always bringing that back to the Father, because he knows exactly where the brokenness is, where the mending needs to take place. And so doing it in partnership with him. Period. Right. We're not just workers for him. We're not just trying to do things for him. He's saying, yoke up with me. Let's go reach my people together. So thank you guys for taking time out just to listen. And I pray that God is just opening up to you more and more as you go through this podcast season with us. We believe that God is going to open up more of your message, who you are as a messenger, who he's called you to reach. So until next time, we want to encourage you to seek the Father, and remember, your tribe is waiting.